Hi, I'm Ian Small and I volunteer at Severndroog Castle on Shooters Hill in the Royal Borough of Greenwich, and every day during the online Sevendroog Festival I'll be telling different aspects about Severndroog Castle and its past, present and future from here in the courtyard of the castle. And today I'm going to be talking about some of the events that have happened, and I'll be mentioning one historic event in particular. Severndroog Castle was commissioned in 1784 by Lady Anne James as a memorial to her husband Sir William, and I'll be telling stories about Anne, William and the Battle of Sevendroog in other talks in this series. As I say, today I'm concentrating on some specific uses. The building has been called Lady James's Folly, but I intend to show that it was much more than this. Other owners of the building have used it for recreational purposes, and I'm going to focus on just one event as an illustration before finishing with a quick reprise of what the Trust, who now manage the building, have done. I'm quoting from an advertisement of 1836, in which year we find the following advertisement for a gypsy party. And I'm quoting from a book by Woolwich historian W.T. Vincent in the second volume of his Records of Woolwich District, published in 1890. Severndroog Castle was a favourite resort of families in the early part of the 19th century. It was a festive resort in 1836, in which year we find the following advertisement of a gypsy party to be held on July the 12th. By a gypsy party, I don't think they meant a party for Roma people. It was a semi-formal outdoor event, something like a grand picnic or festival. July the 12th, 1836, Mr. John Smith solicits the company of his friends to join a select gypsy party at Shooters Hill on Tuesday, to be continued annually, and tickets are 7 and 6pence each. 7 and 6pence was a lot of money. In 1836, it was more like the equivalent of about £40 today. And for that you would get a ticket to admit a lady and a gentleman, and to include a cold collation, tea and coffee, wine negus. That's a drink concocted by a Colonel Negus in the 18th century, made from port, hot water, lemon juice, sugar and nutmeg, which sounds a bit like a cold cure really. Mixed liqueurs, etc. A select portion of the Woolwich military band will commence playing at 1 o'clock for quadrilles, etc. Quadrilles were sort of stylised forms of country dancing, which were then popular. To keep the event perfectly select, the lady's name had to be written on her tickets. There's nothing to suggest that a man had to have his name written on his ticket. It was assumed that if a man could afford equivalent of £40 for a bit of a do, he was a gentleman and needed no identification. There had to be a distinction drawn between ladies and women from Woolwich, given that Woolwich was then a thriving garrison town. Today the castle doesn't require our guests to wear labels with their names. That privilege is reserved for our trustees, our manager and our volunteers, who wear name badges in order that we might be identified. Other owners open the castle doors to the public for greater or lesser extent, and since the castle was refurbished, the Sevendroog Castle Buildings Preservation Trust has presented a huge variety of things, varying from classical music to pop by way of traditional Indian music performed by a group of visiting graduates from the KM Musical Conservatory in Chennai, through English folk, opera, salsa, Christmas carols and Motown. And many of our musical performers have joined us regularly, both live and online. We staged several successful festivals, including one that started in the pouring rain. We've had wedding fairs, craft fairs, film nights, Shakespeare and other dramatic presentations. We've had yoga, we've had Halloween nights. We've had exhibitions on themes such as female suffrage, local history and both world wars, as well as the East India Company. There have been educational visits for schools and youth groups. There have been group visits for community groups, craft works for young children and special events for the local scout troop that shares our name. We had a host more things planned for 2020 to keep the castle alive, but at last COVID has intervened, and at the moment we're relying on online events to keep our profile raised and to make some money from donations. One day we shall be back. I'm sure that Lady James would have approved that her tower was still being used almost 250 years later to inform, educate and entertain people.